I am not the only person that covers high school sports. Thank God for that. Rob Witham is doing it in the Richmond area now. Introduce. If I said who is Rob Witham in terms of your credentials and everything, kind of give me the brief introduction.
Oh, he would be a strange looking dude. That's exactly what he would be. Um, it's been an honor and continues to be able to cover high school sports as well as do a lot of work with Randolph-Macon College up here in the Richmond area in Ashland through what we call the RVA Sports Network, which is mainly digital products from social media to website that covers sports on a continual basis, 24/7, 365 as best as we can.
Now you were telling me you kind of started in the early 2000s. How have you seen social media grow just from what you were doing then to what you're doing now?
Oh, holy cow. Yeah. In 2002, it was, have your rosters and know your players and go to the game and do the radio broadcast. And that was it. I would give a call. I worked at the time at a group of stations here in Richmond that included the sports station that covered high school football, and continue to do so with a excuse me, longtime friend in Gary Hess. After the game, I'd call the station and tell them what the final score of our game was, and then that was it. I was going home to watch highlights and have dinner. And but about a decade later, I find myself sitting at a high school softball game, and I thought to myself, you know what? I really should have a Twitter because I could be sitting here updating people on what's going on. And little did I know the Pandora's box I
Yep.
was opening, because the way our coverage grew, it grew organically. It grew first in the big three counties surrounding the city of Richmond, which is how we ended up with three hyperlocal Twitter feeds and one main feed, which came about a couple of years later. It's now 11 years old, I believe. It just seemed like this is an opportunity for us to get information out, even on a much quicker basis. And those are back in the days when you were successful if you were able to take a picture and put it with your tweet or your Facebook post or whatnot. But now with 5G and all of that, if you don't have video going on, you seem to be behind the times, so to speak. So yeah, it's been a proliferation, the likes of which really no other medium has ever seen. Not radio, not television, not print, and really not even, if you think about it, the actual get on your computer World Wide Web of the late 90s and 2000s. Social media has just taken all of that and grew. Not only did it grow on it, it exploded it.
Yeah, the biggest pleasure. I mean, if you get to work with and talk with Gary Hess, I mean that's overwhelmed everything. Because I met Gary back when I was interning for a radio station in Lynchburg, and obviously it's always been a phone conversation. But Gary's one of the nicest people you'll ever talk to or meet in my
You
eyes.
you got that right. You don't get better people than Gary, no doubt.
Talk about like who is really good that people should focus in on in the Richmond area right now.
Oh boy. Well, you know what? We've got a couple of really interesting storylines going on up here. I'll start in the private ranks. The four schools around Richmond in the VISAA, all in Division One: Benedictine, Trinity Episcopal, St. Christopher's Collegiate. All started the season 3-0. All looked really good, especially Benedictine, who of course are two-time defending champions. As the weeks have gone on, teams have taken losses, with the exception of the Cadets, but they have found really unusual ways to win and stay undefeated ahead of this coming weekend showdown with Trinity in the final week of the regular season. One game they were down 14-0 at the half, and they used a pick six and a safety and a blocked field goal that was returned for a touchdown to tie the game before their offense scored the game winner. This past Saturday, they win 7-0 over Woodbury Forest in a game where the only points scored were on a pick six by Malachi Mingo. So their offense has been struggling, but they still found ways to win. And they are what now? 3 away if they want to complete a championship undefeated season, win at Trinity Saturday, and then, of course, the 2 rounds of the playoffs that start the following week. We've got the big one down here coming up on Thursday night. Most of our good games are on Thursday this week, Bob, because a lot of ADs don't want to mess with Halloween,
Right.
and I can understand why, but there's still a pretty healthy number of games. It just so happens that the most competitive ones on paper are all going to be done Thursday night, including Verina Highland Springs, their annual battle in Eastern Henrico. Highland Springs is on a roll right now. Their quarterback, Antoine Richardson, who was kind of an unknown coming into the year, has just exploded in this 4-game winning streak that they've enjoyed. It's going to be a titanic battle between the two. I know you guys down there are very interested in that game because the fans of Patrick Henry Roanoke would love to see Verina get the win on the road.
Yep.
Which would hurt Highland Springs' chances of grabbing that number 1 seed in Class 5 Region C. I will tell you, however, that Highland Springs does finish with a trip to Hanover, who entered this week at 7-1, and they're going to an undefeated Armstrong team on Thursday night. That's where I will be. So, Highland Springs has a lot of points sitting in front of them on the table, and if they win out, they're going to be the 1 seed no matter what. If they go 1-1, it's going to be exacerbatingly close as to who gets the 1 and who gets the 2. But Coach Lauren Johnson, his 18th season at Highland Springs, he's like, if we play at home, fine. If we have to go on the road, that's fine too. His mantra has been all season, we have 10 real live practices to get ready to win 5 games.
Mm-hmm.
So they have been locked in on trying to get ready to make the run to win the state championship ever since they first cracked the helmets late July, early August.
Well, it's so funny because I feel like people from the state all want to kind of converge on like week 8, week 9 of high school football because you've got those rider points that you're thinking about. Lynchburg and Roanoke looks at Richmond. Richmond might look at Lynchburg, Roanoke. Everybody looks at everybody at this point in the season. So it's kind of like weird in a good way because I know the team I broadcast for a lot, Heritage, is probably concerned with how Thomas Jefferson Richmond does, and vice versa. Vice versa.
Yes.
So
absolutely.
Rider points are crazy weird in a good way, I guess.
Yeah, they most certainly are. And I tell people every year we get to next week and I will bury myself in my office and I will spend probably 3 full days going through, okay, this team, they have this amount of points. This is the maximum they can get, the minimum they can get. Here are the teams they played. Which of those teams are playing this week? Which are idle? And then you start having to find private schools out of state and all of this stuff, especially when you get into the lower classifications like Class 1, Class 2.
Yep.
Oh, it's crazy. But yeah, right now Heritage should be a huge fan of TJ, who I saw live on Friday night get their win over Deep Run. They've got 2 pretty interesting matchups coming up. They got to go to a Mills Godwin team that won't make the playoffs, but is playing everybody very well. And then they got to play Hermitage. And if they could pull off that upset, that would be huge for obviously their seeding in Class 2. But that one's going to be tough because Hermitage is still in a dogfight in Class 5 Region C, trying to make sure they make the party.
TJ is very, very good athletically, I thought they were very, very solid athletically. And, not saying they were poorly coached, but I'm just saying that athletically, if you've got the tools, you can sometimes run for a while, especially once you get into playoffs and other teams' athletes may not be what yours are.
Right. Exactly. And they had the bye week after a loss to Douglas Freeman. They came into the bye week, back-to-back losses, Heritage and then Freeman.
Mm-hmm.
And kind of shaken up a bit in the sense that all the talk here in the Richmond area coming into the year was TJ making a big run in Class 2, and there wasn't a lot of talk about Armstrong. Well, then Armstrong turns around and beats them in week number 2 and kind of, asserts themselves into the conversation, and they haven't slowed down. And I am very excited to see what they look like on Thursday night. But what TJ did, and I talked with their head coach at length yesterday, they took the bye week and got back to the fundamentals and realized where they were, where they wanted to be, but realistically, how are they going to be able to get there?
Right.
They know they got to rest some players. There's only 30, 35 on the roster. You know how it is when you're a school of that level. You just don't have the bodies.
Right.
So you're hoping at this point in the year, as JV comes to a close, you can find a few players there that maybe can come up and help you on special teams, or maybe be a backup at a key position. To give the guys a breather, and TJ seemed to have righted the ship with the bye week and with the approach that they took. Deep Run gave them a scare late. They had a 95-yard pick six with less than 2 minutes to go that suddenly made it a 3-point game, and Deep Run recovered the onside kick, but the TJ defense stiffened at that point, and they went no further, and they held on to win 31-28. So they're going to be a tough out in Class 2 no matter what. Armstrong is from what I hear incredibly impressive, and I can't wait to see them. And King William has got themselves back on the right foot.
Mm-hmm.
After a couple of losses that were kind of head scratching, they're rolling right now. So Class 2 Region A is going to be a lot of fun to look at once we get to the postseason.
The one thing you said that I'm kind of stuck on is about spending those 3 to 4 hours doing points, and I mean it's true, because one region can take you a long time. Once you get into 2 regions, 3 regions, 4 regions, you're really getting a long time, and you hit the nail on the head. Once you have to find schedules of people who are out of state,
yeah,
that can get wild and woolly in a heartbeat.
And I think back to the old days before the great reclassification of 2013, when here in the Richmond area you played all this high school football.
Yep.
And I can't tell you how many years we had teams go 9-1 and miss the playoffs.
Yep.
Simply because there were only 8 slots available for dozens of schools, whether you were one of 4 in Division 5 or one of 4 in Division 6. And if you won your district, that mattered back then, because you get an automatic bid no matter what division you're in. So that kind of eats into the at-larges. There have been years that Verina and Highland Springs played, and they were both 9-0 on the last night of the season. And the winner went to the playoffs as the Capital District champion, and the loser packed up their equipment for the year. So when they changed it all a decade or so ago, there were a lot of people screaming about teams with losing records in the playoffs. And my feeling has always been, let them in. It's okay. This is not a bad thing. We have eliminated the problem of excellent teams not getting a chance to extend their season. Yes, there are going to be some blowouts in the quarterfinal rounds. Yes, I understand that. Some regions use situations like Class 6 Region A, where we have several teams in. There's only 9 teams in that region, Bob, so they're going to let the top 6 in.
Right.
The top 2 going to get a bye to the semis, and 3, 6, and 4, 5 are going to do battle November the 14th. So there are ways to kind of remedy that from an individual region, because they do have the autonomy to do so. But I would much rather see a 4 and 6 team in the playoffs rather than a 9-1 team go home.
See, I'm actually on the other end, because I can be okay if that 4 and 6 doesn't make it, and if the 9-1 doesn't make it. I know that makes me sound like a heartless individual, but when we used to do 4 teams when I was in high school, 4 teams made it from a region, and if the 5th team was 9-1, I don't want to say so be it, but so be it.
So be it.
But I can live with that, because I think once you get into, especially like you said, when you have 6 teams in a region, you have 3 seed who's maybe 7-3, 6-4, and the 6th team, and I've seen it be 1-9.
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
like, oh gosh, why? And it's 2.5 hours, 3 hours at that point, sometimes too. From what I've seen down here, I'm like, why are we doing this?
Yeah. No, I get it. I understand. And there are some games that end up happening in the regional quarterfinal round that you kind of scratch your head and go, well, it really wasn't necessary. The glass half full in me looks at that situation, and I'll take Glen Allen High School as an example. They weren't 1-9, but they had a losing record the first time they made the playoffs.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember how excited the school was, simply because at that time my daughter was attending Glen Allen.
Right.
So the atmosphere about making at least that jump in what then was a very new program. I think it was their fourth season of varsity football. Did they win? No. Did they have a chance to win? Not particularly, but they got the experience of being in after week 11. And 4 years after that, they're rolling. They're getting their first ever playoff win. They go to Atlee and beat Atlee in the first round. They've got a kid who's rushing for 4,000 yards and setting the area record for all time. And to me, if you're a smart coach, you take that circumstance and think
Yep.
to yourself, okay, we may not win this game, but we are building something for the kids who are on their way here.
At the end of the day, I think for me, it's going to be, do I want to die on that hill? I mean, I may not like it greatly, but I mean, it is what it is type of, because I mean, look at the NCAA tournament when it was 64 teams.
Right.
65 was always complaining. 65 was always going to complain. And guess what? If you let 65 in, then 66. So you're never going to be in a win situation unless you probably put everybody in somehow, which gets into impossibilities and stuff we really don't want to have happen.
And maybe, I don't know, just sitting here thinking about it, Bob, maybe it's a generational thing, because I'm a huge NC State fan, and I am old enough to remember when NC State and Maryland played their overtime thriller in the ACC championship, and they were two of the top three teams in the country, the other one at the time being UCLA, of course. The winner of that game got the ACC championship and the conference's bid into the NCAA tournament. There was no such thing as an at-large bid back then. Maryland's season ended at the Greensboro Coliseum, and that was the year that the NCAA all kind of looked at each other and went, man, number 3 team in the country is not even going to make the, and I think it was a 32-team field at the time. And then the following year, 50 years ago, 1975, is when they started changing that. And I can remember when they put it up to 48 teams and then 52 teams, and people were complaining. And the 64 team field happened my senior year of high school 40 years ago, 1985. And the same thing. I totally understand the premise that you're coming from. But, I just remember thinking how lucky I am that I'm not a Maryland fan right now, because I would have been devastated. We went on to win the national title.
Yeah, 2 things on that. I know we've never met at full in depth. We might have met over the course of time. I'll be honest, I can't remember. But my favorite sports story of all time is the 1983 NC State team basketball.
Oh, boy. Oh, my goodness. Now, were you around for that?
I was 4.
You were 4. Okay. I was a sophomore in high school, and I lived and died through that season. I remember the night Wittenberg broke his foot against Virginia, and it broke our hearts. And then we saw him get back just in time for the tournament. Had a big return against Wake Forest in the regular season near the end, and then I'm on a school bus watching them barely make a free throw to win the first game of the ACC tournament, much less go all the way. So, yeah, I had that. Some of the most vivid memories of my life is March and April of 1983.
I have watched the 30 for 30 documentary on NC State. I think it was, I'm trying to remember the name of it now. Survive in Advance, I think.
Survive in Advance, yes, sir.
And I've watched it 6 times probably. So, I mean, people from around Virginia probably are not going to be able to tell you who was Dane Suttle. And I can tell you Dane Suttle because, 90-some% free throw shooter, misses front end twice. And, NC State really should have been dead in that game.
It's so funny you mentioned that. I was asleep, and for some reason I woke up, and it was like 12:30, 1 o'clock in the morning, and I'm like, I think NC State, they're showing that game. So I turned the TV on, and it's like late in the game. So I ended up seeing overtime and yada, yada. And I'm like, oh my gosh, you got to be kidding me. And then the end of the UNLV game. The only game I did not get to see was the Utah game. They did not televise it back then here in Richmond.
Because the whole tournament wasn't televised back then.
Heavens no. Yeah. No way.
Didn't mean to interrupt. Go ahead.
No, 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 no. You're absolutely right about that. You got, if there was a team in your area,
Yep.
if Virginia was in the tournament, VCU was in the tournament,
Right.
one of the local stations would find a way to make it happen. But just NC State Utah Sweet 16 game, no, you figured out the next morning when you got the paper who won.
And then for NC State to get to the Final Four, who did they have to beat? Ralph,
Oh yes,
who is arguably one of the best college players of all time.
and they had never beaten Ralph
Yep.
until they beat him in the ACC final, and then they had to turn around and do it again.
Yep.
And ironically, Bob, I was in a state forensics competition that day, that Saturday when that game happened. You know where it took place? The University of Virginia. I was leaving the campus in Charlottesville listening to the end of the game on the radio with my dad.
And how many people not only thought NC State was going to, I mean, once they got by that, then I think they beat Georgia in the Final Four,
Yep.
which was kind of, I don't want to say anticlimactic, but Georgia was underdog kind of too. And then NC State has to play Houston in the finals. How many people thought NC State was going to win that game?
Nobody.
Exactly.
Outside of the locker room of NC State, absolutely nobody.
And I don't even know if all of them probably believed that because Houston was good. I mean, really, really, really good.
Well, that Saturday, all of the oxygen was taken by that second semifinal between Houston and Louisville. Georgia NC State might as well have been, the opening act for Taylor Swift.
Right.
That's how crazy it was, because you knew both those teams were just going to race up and down the floor.
Right.
It's just going to be a matter of who survived it and who did it best. And certainly Houston did it without a doubt. But yeah, that Monday night, April 4th, 1983. I can relive that in my mind minute by minute without a problem.
Well, and the other thing, you tell the story, so back to kind of high school football, believe it or not, is I remember seeing an ESPN selection show years later because Lefty was coaching at JMU at the time, and Lefty Frizzell and Johnny Orr, who was coaching at Iowa State, kind of got into a little bit of a back and forth, and Johnny Orr said, "You know how to fix it, Lefty? Get rid of those automatic bids." And I get where he was coming from on that. But, for a team like Campbell from the Big South at the time, making the tournaments the highlight of their season, they're going to get crushed. But it's the highlight of their season. So I think, there's no perfect way to do a playoff in a postseason was my final point to that long story I took us down a rabbit hole and then some.
No, you're absolutely right. And whether you come from the direction of what you're seeing, and I don't disagree with the premises and points that you're making whatsoever. I just happen to think a little differently.
Right.
Doesn't mean one's right, one's wrong. There are all great salient points in everything. And you're right. You're never going to find the perfect mix.
Because I don't disagree with you either. I mean, it's one of those things where neither side is wrong. And I think has a most, not to go society on you, but has a most point, somebody's got to be right and somebody's got to be wrong. Well, you told me your point. I told you my point, and we both maybe see it, but we're still going to have our belief system on it.
Right.
Final question. Before I say that, I don't think when you agreed to this interview, you thought you were probably going to get into a talk about 83 NC State.
Hey, I'm perfectly happy with that. As I told you beforehand, anything you want, let's do it.
So if you had to pick by the end of the year, who is going to be holding up a trophy? Anybody from the Richmond metro area?
Wow, boy. I do think Benedictine, even if Trinity can trip them up at home here in this final regular season game, because that is a heated rivalry right now. Trinity won back-to-back. Benedictine now has won back-to-back. Even if Benedictine trips up, if they can kind of find a little bit of the spark to that offense and get it back to at least putting up maybe 21 a game, but their special teams and defense are playing out of their mind right now, which is why I think they're gonna lift up the VISAA Division I championship. Class 5. The way that Antoine Richardson is playing right now, so long as he stays healthy, and his running back with him, Eric Bird, because you respect his game so much that it opens up so much for Richardson to do. If you game plan for Highland Springs in week 2 or 3, and you're game planning for them now, it's a totally different situation because of how Richardson has exploded onto the scene here since really the middle part of, I'd say, September. I think Highland Springs has an excellent chance. I know there's a team called Maury. Verina gave them everything they could handle and were just a play or two away from beating them. I think Highland Springs can do that. In Class 4, I think we have two teams who have a chance to win the state championship. And if they end up playing each other in the Region B final, it would not surprise me if that ends up being the de facto title game. And that would be Verina and Dinwiddie. Dinwiddie has been the best public school team in the Richmond area this entire year. They are still unbeaten. They get their final regular season game on Friday, and then they have a bye going into the playoffs. Zion Boyso, everybody was talking about how are you going to replace Harry Dalton?
Yep.
And very quietly, Boyso went onto the scene. There was not a lot of respect for Dinwiddie. There were some polls up here in the Richmond area that either had them low or not even ranked. And when that happened in late August, I was just shaking my head going, guys, it's Dinwiddie. They always have players. And Zion just stepped up and has gone lights out. Easily one of the favorites for player of the year in the area. So I think both the Blue Devils and the Generals have a chance to win there. And then I could probably give you a little more certainty on this after Thursday night. But again, I'm really excited to see Armstrong in action. And if I see what I've been hearing about, they're going to make waves in Class 2. I don't know if they'll get all the way and hoist the trophy. But I'll tell you this, Bob, if they do, there has been a renaissance of high school football here in the Metro Richmond area over the last 7 or 8 years. We were worried that COVID was going to make a big impact on it negatively. We came out the other side, and it did not. Huguenot, Armstrong, TJ, all have been highly successful. And I can remember, a decade plus of seeing TJ every year, and they barely had 25 players, and they always got beat 69-0. And I just felt so bad for that program. Well, we got teams now that can make waves up at the highest levels. And if there is a Richmond City Schools team that makes and wins a state championship this year, there will be a parade down Broad Street. I guarantee it.
It may be the most unfair question to ask of how do you think a team is going to do when you haven't seen the rest of the state, but hey, it's what we got. It's what we got to do in the media.
Yeah, it's unfortunate that that's the one thing, and having the NFHS when schools use it the right way and correctly. And, you can go back and try to watch games or at least see highlights of teams, et cetera, et cetera. There's a ton of teams I'd love to see up in Nova right now because Manchester is red hot, undefeated going into the Class 6 Region A playoffs. And I think they got Huguenot final night of the regular season. That's going to be the biggest battle of next week here in Richmond. But if they could beat Huguenot, that's going to put them in a position where I think, Oscar Smith needs to be a bit wary. There's just, I wish there were so many teams I wish I could see that unfortunately you don't get a chance to until, the moment of truth.
Sure. Well, you've always got your friend in Lynchburg here that can give you the Lynchburg take. And hey, next time we'll break down that NC State Pepperdine game a little bit more in depth. Final thing, if people want to keep up to date, tell them the best way to do it again.
No problem. Thank you for allowing me to do that. Our website is rvasportsnetwork.com. That is basically where we keep touch with everybody on schedules and scoreboards and our weekly poll, regional standings, et cetera, et cetera. On social media, the best way to follow us is either via X, which you can get us at the RVA Sports Net. That's the RVA Sports Net. Or over on Instagram, which we have really revved up that part of our social media coverage here over the last 6 months or so. And that's at RVA Sports Network. RVA Sports Network on Instagram. And everything we pass on Instagram goes to our Facebook feed, goes to our threads. So those are the two main ones that'll get you the information you're looking for.
Rob will do it again down the road.
Would love to. Bob, I appreciate the opportunity.